Hello everyone! I decided that now is a good time to give you a little update on what I've been reading lately, because A, it's been a few months since the last one, and B, I've got family coming for Thanksgiving, and I don't think that I have enough time to squeeze in a full film review with all the work I have to do to get ready. So let's do something a little simpler, a little less labor-intensive, and talk books instead. One of the hottest books of the summer was Beach Read by Emily Henry. I didn't get to it until summer was over, but since it's pretty unusual for me to read anything within 6 months of its publication, especially something as popular as this was, I'm still going to count it as my one trendy moment of the year. The protagonist here is a young romance novelist with several successful books under her belt, but she's hit a slump following the sudden death of her father and the revelation that he had a secret life. Nearly broke and desperate for inspiration before she hits her publisher's deadline at the end of the summer, she unwillingly goes to her dad's secret love nest to clear it out and sell it. It turns out that the next-door neighbor is also a writer, but he writes dark, heavy literary fiction with unhappy endings, essentially the opposite of what she writes. And she also knows him as the mysterious but attractive guy who harshly criticized her work in a college writing class that they took together years ago. Things happen, and they agree to a challenge where they will each try to write a book in the other one's style and see who can get their book published first. They go on outings together for research, and sparks fly, and she wonders about his past that he's very unwilling to talk about while her attraction to him grows. Of the books I'm discussing in this video, this is the only one that I didn't write down any notes for after I finished it. And now I'm kicking myself because it's been a couple months and I don't remember enough details to really say anything. It was alright. It had some funny moments, some funny lines. It had some romantic and exciting parts. It had some sad stuff. It got really sad at one point. You know, contemporary romance fare. I did race through it in 2 or 3 settings, which was nice. The way things have been going for me this year on the reading front, it was actually pretty amazing to get through a book so quickly. Little tangent here, I am not impressed with my reading record for 2021. It is not all about quantity, and I did spend extra time reading a few really long books, but I also took far longer to read some things than I should have, because there were days where I just didn't make time to read. I was busy with other things. Frankly, I was too busy making videos. And the only time I made, if I made any time, was at breakfast and right before going to sleep at night. And I don't know, I'm just kind of disappointed in myself. I love reading, I always have, and I feel like I've kind of been pushing it to the side. So I'd like to get back on track. Anyway, Beach Read was fine. The next thing I read was The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Here's what happened. Since some of you like the videos I've posted where I read a short story on camera, I thought I'd post one where I read this. I've read it before, and I figured it would be a good spooky choice for October, and it's short. At least, it appears to be short. But halfway through the story, I stopped filming. It had been 45 minutes, an hour, and I was only halfway through, and it just was not going well. It didn't work. It was a drag. And my biggest fear, one of my biggest fears here, is that my audience is just going to be bored to tears. So, scrapped that idea. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, as it turns out, is significantly longer and slower than I remember it. Probably because what I remember, what I think everyone remembers, is the climactic part with school teacher Ichabod Crane being chased by the Headless Horseman. And that part is great. When I read the second half of the book to myself, that part gave me goosebumps. It's how long the story takes to get there that makes it feel kind of tedious. Not that it isn't entertaining, it is. It's quite funny in parts, but it wasn't what I was looking for. And yes, my expectations definitely colored the experience, and had I just decided to pick it up and read through it on my own, maybe I would feel differently, but there are many descriptions of the countryside, the people, the food, whole paragraphs devoted to describing food, and it really stretched things out, and I couldn't believe how many times Irving repeated certain phrases and words like perchance and bosom. You may not notice things like that when you're just reading on your own, but when you're reading out loud, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Wow, this is the 4th time in 20 pages he's said perchance. That's not a word that we use very often these days. So my current assessment is that it's kind of dull. It's got humor, and it's got some really chilling bits, especially toward the end, but it's better if you skip ahead to the good parts. How dare I say such a thing? This is an American classic. At this point, I was on a spooky streak, and also shamelessly looking for shorter books to read to boost my numbers and my self-esteem. So, on a whim, I got the ebook for Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu out of the library. Carmilla is a Victorian vampire tale where a beautiful young lady has an accident and ends up becoming the house guest of another young lady and her father. This young lady, the narrator, named Laura, is lonely and eager for a friend, and Carmilla quickly fills that void with her winsome ways and her perfect features. But Laura is increasingly disturbed by Carmilla's fixation with her and her strange behavior, unaware that she is an intended victim. Carmilla is a good deal shorter than its more famous successor, Dracula, and it's also different in that it features a female vampire who preys on female victims, which leads to a not-so-subtle lesbian subtext. I saw some reviews where people made a really big deal about tension between the two characters, but I saw it, but it was definitely more one way than some of these reviewers were interpreting it. Laura's fond of Carmilla. She finds her charming and beautiful, but she's creeped out by her obsessive watchfulness and her weird behavior. I'd enjoyed the book more than I'd expected to, since I'm not really into vampires or vampire stories, but I did have 2 criticisms. One is that Laura is kind of a dull and insipid protagonist, and as the narrator, she's kind of frustrating because it takes her such a long time to catch on to the fact that there's something going on, while the audience, at least the contemporary audience, knowing that this is a vampire story, is in the know from the start, and so we're just waiting. The other criticism is that while it's a quick and engrossing read, the last section is surprisingly boring and anticlimactic. It's as if Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu wanted to wrap everything up really fast. He was done with the story once the dramatic tension of trying to figure out what's going on and trying to save the protagonist was all done. He wanted to dispatch with Carmilla ASAP and just be done with it. I feel the same way about Dracula, though. It's a great read until the last section when they're actually trying to get him. That part, to me, just stretches on and on. I feel that way when I'm watching the movies, too. I've read Dracula several times, and every time I get to the last part of it, I don't really care anymore. I'm checked out. I'm ready for the story to be over. All the good stuff already happened. So it's interesting that this book, which came out, I think it was 25 years or so before Dracula, has the same fault. I'd say that all the thrills and chills occur in the first 60% here, and those are fairly good. The prose is a bit heavy-handed and sensational, but it gets the job done, and I was entertained. I next read Picnic at Hanging Rock by Joan Lindsay, which I'd been wanting to read since I saw the incredibly memorable Peter Weir film a year ago. The book is a modern Australian classic about how people's lives are affected after 3 schoolgirls and a teacher disappear while on a school excursion. In many ways, and you can't say this about many adaptations, the film is just like the book. Events unfold exactly as they do in the book, and images are presented in a similar way to how they're described, and it's just as haunting. I read the last 20 or 30 pages in bed, and then I found myself struggling to fall asleep. I was just so... It's not that it's frightening, but it is eerie, and it affects you. I think the biggest difference between the book and the film is the sound, and the sound in the movie made such an impression on me. I have not been able to stop thinking about it for the last year. There are a few instances where Lindsay refers to a sound that seems to emanate from the mountain, or a sound like the rumble of tribal drums across the plain. It's not the same as the prevalent, inexplicable sound that you hear repeatedly in the film. I think that the middle section is a little less engaging, but that might have been because my attention was divided at the time and I wasn't able to just sit and fly through the book the way I wanted to. See previous comments about not making enough time to read. But the novel's intent is very clear, to show how one incident causes a succession of ripples that are far-reaching and life-changing. Some of them good, some of them beneficial, and some of them downright horrible. The ending is a mystery, as is just what on earth happened up there on Hanging Rock. And I kind of like it that way, although, of course, I can't help speculating. There are creepy moments, especially the reveals of certain crazy details, but there are also beautiful moments, and I very much enjoyed the book, although I'm not sure that it will linger with me the way the film has. And I read Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. A couple years ago, I read and loved Dandelion Wine, and this is its companion piece, although, in my opinion, each book stands independently. I had had reservations about this one, but it wasn't the diabolical work that I'd been led to expect, although the Illustrated Man is a great villain. Dandelion Wine and Something Wicked This Way Comes share the same protagonist. They're imbued with the same sense of joy and exhilaration, but also the same bittersweetness, especially this one where it's preoccupied with age, regret, and death. Something Wicked This Way Comes has the same wonderful writing, too. It's Ray Bradbury, after all, who does unconventional things with parts of speech and paints a picture in the most original, refreshing, I never heard it put like that, but it makes so much sense way that makes me just want to soak in the words and reread phrases and sentences over and over. Although I will say this, in all honesty, there were a few times when I got lost in Bradbury's musings, using Charles Holloway as a conduit. Times when the imaginative description got so thick, or the pontificating got so heavy that I wasn't 100% sure anymore what he was getting at. What I loved was how it explored temptation, a lure that works on the middle-aged who long for youth, and the young who long to be grown up. I loved the picture of loyal friendship, with Will desperately trying to pull his best friend Jim Nightshade from the darkness. And I loved that Will's relationship with his father is the heartbeat of the story. Charles Holloway is a great character, a tired, gray man with no clue how to relate to his son and questioning every decision of his life, who ends up a most unlikely hero. I love how he and Will discover each other. Their late night heart-to-heart actually brought a tear to my eye, and they form a strong bond with the help of a little magical realism. I was not expecting so much depth and emotion, and it really made the book for me. I don't think that I loved Something Wicked This Way Comes as much as Dandelion Wine, but I really enjoyed it, and I agree that it's a near perfect companion for a different season of the year. So those are the books I've read lately. If you want to know what I'm currently reading, I am almost done with My Friend Dahmer, a graphic novel by Derf Backderf. This requires explanation, I know. Backderf was in high school with Jeffrey Dahmer, and he was kind of friends with him. These are his recollections of what Dahmer was like, his speculations about what led to him becoming one of the most notorious serial killers of the last century. I probably shouldn't say just speculations because he did a lot of research for this and uses some of Dahmer's own quotes, and his thoughts on what could have been done, if anything, to prevent what happened. I've had this on my list for years but didn't get around to it until now, probably because I'm just not a graphic novel reader. I don't find graphic novels as pleasurable to read as regular books. But it is a very quick and accessible read. As far as the content goes, though, I'm not sure how I feel about it. It's definitely provocative and disturbing. It's not for kids, obviously, despite the pictures. Just because something is a graphic novel or a comic book does not mean that it is for kids. And there is some really, graphic stuff. Some of it, a lot of it implied, but when you're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, even the implied stuff is shocking. But I do appreciate the way that Backderf approaches his subject and uses his unique perspective not to make excuses, but to provide some insight. It's very interesting, but it's also disturbing. I've also been reading this book that my dad picked up at a yard sale of all things. We don't go to yard sales. Sometime last year, and it's Lines of Battle, Letters from American Servicemen, 1941 to 1945. And as you might be able to guess, it is a collection of letters collected by Annette Tapert, written by American servicemen during World War II. And it's very good. I am about halfway through, and it is chronologically organized, various letters, some from names, a few from names that you recognize, but mostly from boys and men who have no claim to fame, who were writing home when they had a few moments here and there, openly confessing their fear in their letters, alongside their often poetic meditations. Some of the letters are humorous, some of them are intense, describing battles and invasions, and some of them, especially the ones that were written to be sent home in the event of the writer's death, are heartbreaking, but also beautifully written. And I actually just realized that this book has an inscription in the corner here, and let's see what it says. Dear Dad, In a letter, a correspondent tries to convey to his reader a sense of where he is, how he is, and what it is like. These lines of battle, some written by great men, others by the little guys, are poured out of the pain and loss, the fear and loneliness of world war. These are your peers. These are your stories, your letters. They are collected here so that all of us will never forget the sacrifice and heroism of these people who put their comfort and lives on the line for the sake of our heritage and our freedom. May this book remind you of your experiences and your friends, your times, and your place in history. God bless you, Dad. Happy Father's Day, June 4th, 1987. Well, that was one of the best inscriptions I've ever encountered in a used book. When you write something in a book, you never know who's going to end up reading it years later and how it might affect them. I was going to read excerpts from a few of the letters in this book that have stood out to me so far, but, well, that inscription made me feel a little emotional, and I feel like I couldn't possibly get through a couple of those letters that I had picked out, so I'll skip it. Alright, I hope you enjoyed hearing what I've been reading in the past couple months. Maybe you found something of interest, I hope so. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will be back, hopefully, I'm aiming to post a review next Saturday as usual, but we'll just have to see if that works out. If it doesn't, it'll be Monday or Tuesday or sometime. I'll do my best, but I'm not going to stress out about it because you guys have told me that you don't want me to stress out about things like that, and I know that you are all very patient and forgiving, and I really appreciate that. So I will post whenever the next video is done, and we'll see when that is. Thanks for watching.